Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Healthy Profits Podcast. I'm your host, Ray Ireland. We're going to be diving into how to elevate your podcast brand with some holistic hacks for wellness entrepreneurs. We're going to be talking about positioning power and branding, and how when you stand up in your branding, when you shine bright, shine baby shine, and then that is when you truly get to be seen and heard and attract the right people that are looking for you. You don't want to get stuck in the mess. You don't want to get stuck in the scroll. I'm going to share with you my 2-step process for really working with that positioning and elevating your brand. So let's dive in. So when you're not positioned as an expert, this can be a problem when you are going to new conversations, talking to new people, maybe going to events. When you're in that conversation spot, people are like, well, who are you? Where are you from? How can I trust you? And so you need to build up that trust, build up that authority, and position yourself. And this truly starts with the inner game of you choosing this and doing it. No one else can do it for you. I've seen brand elevation fails, we can call them, where PR companies go in, take a person and try and elevate their brand and turn it into something amazing, but that person isn't that yet, right? And I think we've probably all seen that type of person. And then you meet them in person or you go see them speak and you're like, or you watch a live, or you listen to their podcast, it hits flat because they are not truly being that elevated brand. So we're going to really talk about this holistic way of elevating your brand in authenticity and in care and in intentionality. So let me share my story and you might relate. So the first year that I actually hit 6 figures in my coaching business was the same year that I launched my podcast. Coincidence or not? Honestly, it wasn't. It was because I was choosing to actually position myself as an expert, put my information, my knowledge out there in a beautifully designed way and in an easy way for my listeners to really soak in the information, understand it, and let it land and truly transform them. As health and wellness entrepreneurs, you are not just here to be a doctor that is spewing information, especially if you have a podcast and you're creating an online brand. You're actually here to have this quality of performance, of inspiration, of really being like, you can change. Let me show you how. And that conversation is way more exciting, way more interesting than telling people a step-by-step thing that they have to do without any of the emotion or the juice, right? It's same thing like this podcast. We do go into some pretty nitty-gritty technicalities, but if we're just saying the technicalities and not giving you the purpose or the reason around, we want to be elevating health and wellness brands so they can get their message out there and they can heal people and save people's lives. Like, that is why we're doing this. That's why you get into the nitty-gritty. And so same thing goes for your brand. It needs to share that. So when I decided to start my podcast, that was the first year I hit 6 figures in my coaching business. And it was really cool because I got to use the podcast as a platform to build up that credibility and trust with people that were in my space. Most of the clients that weren't clients and became clients, they said, I have been following you for a very long time, but once you started your podcast, and I started seeing it, seeing clips, seeing reels, listening to the full episodes, that's when I really started to understand you have what I've been looking for. Wow. Now, if every podcast could do that, everyone would be monetizing, everyone would be happier and having a massive impact in other people's lives because it's a clear exchange of energy. And the podcast space is so cool. It's because you really do get to have this platform of storytelling. It's not a quick thing where you have to be scroll stopping if someone's going to listen to your podcast. You do want to be engaging, you want to be hooking at the beginning, but if someone's going to listen, they're going to sit down and listen. it's a little bit different than if you're outside of a restaurant waiting for a friend and just scrolling through social media. You're not going to just scroll through podcast episodes. So it's really cool. And I want to say that I've seen a lot of podcasts also fail in this regard because it's not just solely about putting a podcast out there, but it's about how you put the podcast out there, which is what I'll go into today in this episode. So you don't want to have more just blabber on the internet. We have enough. Don't you agree? So we don't want to be associating your brand from the beginning to be something that people scroll over. Do you know that friend? Do you know that friend that you want to stay connected to on social media, but what they're putting out there just isn't that interesting? You're just going to scroll. They don't really have too much to say. You're just going to move on. You still love them as a human, but unfortunately, their content is not landing. This is what I don't want you to get into the groove of. And so I think it also, you can always pivot if you feel like you've been that friend. Don't worry. I was also that friend too. You can pivot, and the way that you can pivot is through doing something like rebranding, relaunching a podcast, putting a new side of yourself out there to be seen. And that's where it can get really fun and really creative. So, our 2-step plan that I want to give you guys today for elevating your podcast brand in a holistic way is step 1, make sure you get your inner game elevated, your inner voice elevated. Who are you being? Who are you showing up as? And is it matching that elevated brand? If you were to hire $1 million brand designer and they came up with something, would you be matching that $1 million brand, or would you be hiding behind it? We never want the person, the host of the show, to be hiding behind their brand. We want them to be equal to. So you can also refer back to episode number 2, which talks about how you can ruin your credibility using a podcast. Again, something we do not want you to do. On the other hand, this is an amazing way where you can actually gain a lot of credibility is through your podcast and through that alignment of elevation with your inner self and who you are as a human behind closed doors, as well as who you are in your podcast and out in the online space and out in the world in your business. So then once you clean up that inner game, which tons of mindset stuff out there, go check it out. Then you can go into that outer voice, that outer expression of that elevated you. So that's when people start to see and hear you differently. And now it's really cool because the first thing that they'll do when they pull up your podcast is not listen. They're going to see the image that is on your podcast. And that's really important because that's what they're going to look at before they actually click play. That is like the guardian to them moving forward. So, is that image representing your elevated brand? Is it clear? Can they actually see what's written? Is the image clear? With podcast art, it's actually pretty unique because it's small and you're usually looking at it on like your phone screen or something tiny. So, it needs to be really clear and visible, and the writing needs to be clear. Also, is it bold? Even if you have a softer, maybe it's like a more feminine branding, you still want it to be bold enough to capture you. And so it's not just like another thing that they can pass over, but it's wow, it gives you a clear feeling or sensation as the viewer of the image. So that's why bold is important. And then, of course, is it engaging and scroll stopping, right? Is it something unique? There's this one ad that's on my Instagram that I've seen 1,000 times, and it's this like super standard, like crinkly paper with this like certain font that everyone uses that's just in black. And it is so boring. And every time I honestly get annoyed. I don't even know what this brand is. I don't know what it's for, what it's selling, but I'm literally annoyed because of how boring it is. Don't let that be you. Do something different, do something unique. You can always test and bring your images to your inner circle or your friends, your family, your close listeners, and say, which image do you resonate with most? Which one was most captivating? So that way you can get that real-time feedback as well. So those are some amazing tips that you want to just have in mind when creating your brand art and making sure that it is matching this elevated positioning that you can do. When you have this, I mean, it's just incredible the doors that will open because people will be like, oh my gosh, you have a podcast? Wow, this podcast looks amazing. I want to listen to it. And sometimes, even if it just looks good on the outside, people will invite you to be a guest on their show or speak at their event or do all these things, come to their mastermind, speak it and collaborate with their retreat even before they listen to the episode. Now, I'm not telling you guys to make the episode itself crappy. Obviously, we have so many other episodes just here on Healthy Profits to help you guys really create amazing, amazing episodes. But I'm telling you, the book cover itself is a bit of a gatekeeper. So you want to be prepared. And if you can really create something that is elevating you, when you show up in that elevated way as well, and you're sharing this with people, whether it's online or in person, you will make a lasting impression. And that is such a cool thing to do. And to make that impression and then say, all right, you go down this rabbit hole. You go listen to this when you get home or when you're in your car. And people will, when they feel that hit of energy and of alignment and of connection and of inspiration. So if you are not feeling like your brand is elevated by your podcast, you may want to do a relaunch. It's totally okay. We do that all the time. In Evolve Podcasting, people come to us and say, we just need to shake things up. And so if you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're coming up with something fresh, different, and really shine. Let yourself be seen in a new way. And it's a great way to leverage current listeners and their engagement and get that feedback and pivot and make sure that show is really specific just for them and they're getting really everything that they need. Because when you do that, you will attract new elevated clients and listeners as well. So if you're, again, not feeling like your podcast is really aligned with your level of elevation that you want to be putting out there, that level of positioning, of course, you can always schedule a free podcast call with us. We're doing podcast audit calls, and we'll take a look at your branding. Let us know that you listened to this episode, and we'll specifically look at that part. We'll look at your branding. We'll, of course, look at your podcast as a whole and how you're monetizing and all of those fun things. And we'll give you some feedback based on what we know works and doesn't work. So I hope this helps you guys and inspires you to really show up as yourself, as your boldest, brightest self, and put that out there into the world because you do have a message that is so important. People need to hear it. And sometimes people need just some extra flashing lights or glitter to take a moment, right? We're all a little caught up in our day-to-day. So play with it, get creative, and have fun. I can't wait to see these new elevated brands.
Now that was a great episode. Thanks for joining us and tuning in to the Healthy Profits Podcast.
Sammy and I are here to help you turn your health podcast into a treasure trove of opportunity for your listeners and your business. So join us twice a week as we unleash our favorite tips and strategies that have helped our clients at Evolve Podcasting turn their show into a thriving part of their business.
And make sure you subscribe and listen in as each episode builds upon each other. And I know that you're a generous leader, so make sure you share this podcast with your fellow wellness entrepreneurs so we can all grow together.
Until next time, stay healthy and keep thriving.
Bye.
Bye.